Welcome to the assembly guide for a wood pellet patio heater. My name is Tyson Traeger and I will be your tutorial for your wood pellet patio heater assembly. Might make it easier on you to put it on a table so you're not on your knees the whole time. First thing you want to do is remove the top filler tray. It's got all your hardware and other parts we're going to be putting on later somewhere else. Go ahead and grab your stovepipe. Careful that the spark arrestor, there's 3 pieces of stovepipe inside this. You'll learn that a little bit later, but go ahead and hold on to the bottom so the spark arrestor in the stovepipe doesn't fall out. Set that on the ground. Remove the cardboard that the stovepipe was being held in by. Your second hopper lid, go ahead and put that on the ground. Next we're going to remove the firebox, the main component of the stove. What you want to do is grab with 2 hands inside the firebox and pull it out and set it on the ground. Next we have the top reflector. We'll go ahead and set that on the ground. And the last thing in the box is our second hopper, which we'll be installing here shortly. First thing you'll do is remove the ash pan from the bottom of the stove. In your filler tray that you removed earlier, we'll go ahead and unpack the top door and find your heat shield. That's your square flat piece that's going to go on the bottom of the stove. On top of the flanges, doesn't matter which way you put that in there. Go ahead and get our nuts and bolts out here, out of our hardware bag. So we've got our hardware out on the table. We're going to go ahead and grab one of our feet. We're going to put a washer over the black gasket. Send it through one of the 4 holes provided for your feet. I'm going to grab a 1/4-inch nut and put that on that bolt on that foot. Now if you have an unlevel surface, you can add an extra nut to that and adjust for level. So I'll go ahead and I'll continue and I'll put the other 4, the other 3. Sometimes it's easiest to do this from inside the stove. And to make those tight, you can simply just turn the bottom feet clockwise and your bottom heat shield is installed. Find those in your hardware bag. You have 2 brackets. One is a right side bracket and one is a left side bracket. The right side bracket has 2 holes in it. We'll go ahead and cover our tools for right now. We're going to be using a drill, a wrench, and to open your box, a knife or scissors. Go ahead and take the bolt, put it through your bracket, and get the first bolt started. Take your second bolt, go ahead and adjust it all the way down, and we'll do the same for the opposite bracket. Next we'll have a heat shield. This is a heat shield. There's 2 heat shields, one for each side of the hoppers. Doesn't matter which side they go on. We're going to go ahead and just drop it in until the slots line up and it'll lock in place. Go ahead and put on our second heat shield. This one's a little easier because the hopper's not in the way, and it'll just hang there until we get our second hopper on. Second hopper, slide it into the slot, and it has 2 slots in the hopper. You're going to slide the bracket into the slot and it will snap down onto that bracket and be locked into place. There is a flange holding it on, 4 10/32 bolts. Go ahead and put those on there with your drill and your second hopper is installed. Your air chutes and top collar are located in your right hand hopper. Go ahead and set the top collar down. This is your air chute. This is going to go inside of the stove. Easiest if you load a bolt on your drill prior to installing. With the flanges that have the PEMs or nuts already installed on the back of the flange, is going to go towards the firebox. Up and underneath the chute, you're going to line up your PEMs and put a bolt in. There's 2 bolts. And there's chute's installed. We want to be sure that the 3-PEM side is facing towards the front of the stove. We're going to slide it. This is your firebox bottom. This is your fire grate. We'll go ahead and set the fire grate down for now. The firebox bottom has 3 PEMs on one of the 4 sides. The other 3 sides have 2 PEMs. We are going to want to make sure that the front side with the 3 PEMs faces the front side of the firebox. Before we install that, it'll be easiest if we load the drill with a bolt. Get that ready because we're going to need one hand to hold the firebox bottom in there and one hand to put the bolt in. We're going to slide it up and underneath until it's nice and snug in there. You're going to want to line up your PEM holes. Go ahead and put a bolt right in the front to hold it in place. We have 7 more bolts to put in. I suggest that we go around, put 1 bolt on each side, only about halfway in, until we get the other 4 bolts in there, and we'll go ahead and finish it at that point. Fire grate, and it goes into the slot provided in the firebox bottom. We're going to want to go ahead and make sure that the slots are lined up horizontal with the side of the stove, and it sits snugly in the hole. The heat baffle has already been previously installed for you. I'm going to install the stovetop collar to the stovetop. Start by lining the seam on the back of the stovetop collar to the back of the stovetop. The way we know this is the back of the stovetop is the front has a flange on it. That will be the front of your stove. You're going to want to line up the 4 holes with the 4 flanges on the back of the stove top. You're going to put a bolt in one of the holes with the 10/32 nut. I've got all the bolts and nuts started. The next easiest thing to do is to take your drill, hold the back of the nut, and tighten it until it's tight. Next we're going to put the top onto the stove. There will be 12 10/32 bolts used. Easiest if we just start each bolt at each corner so we make sure that all of our holes and PEMs line up. Now we can go ahead and put the rest in and tighten them down. Door hinges will be located in your hardware bag. This is your door hinge. We'll be using 2 10/32 bolts. You're going to want to make sure that the PEM at the top of the door hinge is on the top side. Go ahead and put the bolt through the hole and get it started. We'll come down and put a bolt in the second hole, and we're going to want to keep it as vertical as possible as there's a little play in those holes. Next we're going to put on our door. We're going to take our door and make sure that it's facing the door latch receiver. Easiest if you close the door so it's got some support so it can actually sit there without a bolt in it. Next we have 2 1/4 bolts. Those are the 2 large size bolts, the only 2 large size bolts you have in the packet of hardware. These are what secure the door. You just want them finger tight. Might help them to open up the door to give yourself a little bit more wiggle room. Your door glass, careful not to drop it, it'll shatter. This is Neo-Ceram, very high temperature glass. You're going to want to open our door. We're going to set the glass in between the 5 PEMs provided. We're going to grab 5 10/32 bolts. If you have a newer model, you'll have a retaining washer that you'll just slip over the PEMs. If you're given washers and nuts, you'll put 5 washers over each PEM, which will help brace the piece of glass and hold it firmly against the door. The ash pan is the first thing we pulled out of the bottom of the stove. This rectangular piece is your ash pan front. Notice you have one side plain steel and the other side painted. We're going to want the painted side facing out. We're also going to want the holes that are closer to the top of the ash pan front. We're going to want to make sure that that is on the top side. To hold this on there, we're going to use a handle, 2 1/4 nuts. And because it's got a handle and a moving part, as far as people using the handle, we're going to put a lock washer behind the nut. We'll go ahead and put the handle through the 2 holes on the ash pan front. Slide the 2 bolts through the front of the ash pan. Put your lock washer on there and put your nut on there. Go ahead and grab our wrench, tighten both of those down until you've got a nice snug fit and your ash pan's completed. Go ahead and slide it in on the 2 tabs sticking out, which are your ash pan rails. Go ahead and take your hopper lid, set it on your hopper. You'll be using 2 10/32 bolts. Put the first bolt in halfway, make an even distance on both sides. Put your second bolt in. This again will be a finger tight, allowing your hopper lid to open and close freely. Turning it clockwise so it's on there nice and firm. Installing your 2 hopper handles. Open your hopper lid. Again, another moving part. I'm going to use 2 lock washers and 2 1/4 nuts. Put your PEMs into the 2 holes on the side of the hopper. Put a lock washer and then a nut. Tighten those down with your wrench. You have 2 spring handles. One goes on your door latch. Set it on there, turning it clockwise. Give a few twists. Don't go too far. Go ahead and take your second spring handle, put it on your damper. Spark arrestor is located inside the middle of your stovepipe. Go ahead and slide it out with these, being sure not to bend it on its way out. You also want to be very careful with the paint on this product, as it's not cured before you use it. You have 3 tabs on the top of this spark arrestor. They will be folded out to a 90-degree position. We'll then grab our top reflector, set it on top of our 3 holes, and with 3 10/32 nuts and PEMs, we'll lock it in place. And your top reflector is installed to your spark arrestor. You have 2 pieces of stovepipe tucked inside of each other, or there are 2 pieces of stovepipe. Go ahead and try and open up the gap between the first piece of stovepipe and pull out the second piece of stovepipe. The stovepipe has what we call a reefs lock on it. It's easy if we set it down on a soft surface. We're going to tuck the male end at the bottom of the stovepipe into the female end. Slowly push our way up towards the top until it snaps together. Go ahead and put our first piece of stovepipe on our stove, slipping it over the top collar until it fits at the bottom of the stove. Next, we'll go ahead and install our second piece of stovepipe. Now I can put all 3 pieces together. I'll go ahead and get rid of the table so you can see it in full. We'll take our second piece of stovepipe, slide it over the crimped end, put it down until it's nice and snug. Go ahead and grab your spark arrestor and your top reflector, slide it down over the crimped end. Go ahead and stand back and look at it and make sure it's nice and straight. You're provided with 9 self-tapping screws. Go ahead and grab your drill. Again, making sure it's nice and straight before you put your screws in it. We recommend 3, spread out in thirds at each junction point. You've completed the assembly of your wood pellet patio heater.